Hey there, unfiltered friends. This is Amanda.
Hello, and Megan.
So today we'll be sharing a throwback episode from season 1 where we discussed Jonathan Mooney's book, Normal Sucks. I know it sounds cliche, but this is one of those you'll laugh, you'll cry, and you'll do everything in between kind of books.
That is 100% true. I did both when we read it for the podcast, and it was a reread for me, so I knew what to expect. So we'll be sharing this series of episodes over the coming weeks and then share our discussion with Jonathan Mooney himself as well.
Yeah, so you're likely going to notice a slightly different style compared to our current vibe. We were brand spanking new, and honestly, we're still not entirely sure how we got Jonathan to come on and chat with us about neurodivergent affirming life and learning, but we did, and we're super excited about that still, and we're resharing all of it, the book club and the chat with the author over the next month.
Yeah, I'm still riding that high, and it's been about a year. So, but look how far we've come.
I definitely didn't guess. When I set this up in my bathroom and was like, we'll do this for a few months and it won't go anywhere. And then I'll be able to say that I tried podcasting once. I never thought we would be at this point.
Look at us now, right?
So, tens of thousands of listens later, like, okay, we did this. We're totally doing this. All right.
I know it's bananas. I don't look at the stats that often, but I looked the other day and I was like, whoa. And then I sent them to my mom and my husband. I was like, so yeah, it's a shock to us all. But we want to remind you that our book club will be transitioning over to our Patreon community come September of 2025. We will meet 2 times per month, and we would love to welcome you to come and join the discussion.
Yes, absolutely. We totally would. Read the book. Don't read the book. Engage, be a fly on the wall. Whatever works for you works for us. But we are pretty excited about this kind of like change up to the book club. It can be so challenging as a secular progressive homeschooler to find your people. And this is just going to be one more way to make connections.
Yeah, I mean, if you've never heard the story, Amanda and I met in an online homeschool parent book club. We were co-hosts and business partners before we ever met one another in person, ever. So please don't underestimate the power of virtual friendships and connections. They are very real.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're going to link the information in the show notes about how to join the new virtual book club. You can join as an all-access member, which gives you a monthly unit study, other live support meetings, multiple times a month, group chats, and like loads more. Or if you want, you can just join book club and come listen to those 2 meetings each month. You can, like I said, just listen. You can join in the conversation, whatever works for you.
Yeah. And if neither of those are options for you right now, you're like, it's summer, my brain is swimming. I can't just like stop giving me things to do. Right. Yeah. You're looking for more points of connection. Come join our Patreon as a free follower. You don't have to pay anything. You don't need an account, nothing. We share free content. Amanda puts out a really awesome newsletter over there every single month with what we're up to and behind the scenes stuff and more. So yeah, come hang out with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're going to pop a coupon code for 90% off your first month in the show notes. You can use the code bookworm, all one word, capital bookworm, when joining our Patreon for that first month discount. But now, without further ado, we hope you enjoy Normal Sucks. Hello. Welcome to Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Amanda, and my fabulous co-host is...
Hello, I'm Megan.
So if you're new to our podcast, here's an interesting fact. Megan and I have never actually met in person. We met in a virtual book club for homeschool moms and have become friends with a deep respect for each other, despite, or maybe because, of our very different journeys in homeschooling. So we have carried our love of books and the origin of our friendship over into our podcast with a weekly book club episode where we discuss our current book club, which typically relates to homeschooling, parenting, and or neurodivergence. Our current book club series selection touches on 3 of those things. So Normal Sucks was written by Jonathan Mooney, who is a dyslexic writer, speaker, and advocate who didn't read until he was 12 years old. In this month's book club selection, Normal Sucks, he epically blends both the heartbreak and hilarity of his life's journey. And we are beyond honored to introduce him today as our first official guest author here on our podcast. So, welcome, Jonathan, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the unfiltered part. That like that intrigues me. So let's see where this goes.
We're gonna do full disclosure here. I may not quite have the mini voice down, but I definitely have the cursing like a truck driver that you talked about with your mom. So yeah, we have that going for us. The F-bombs come from my end.
Okay.
We have a guest who will be joining us later today with her child, who's super excited to meet you. And he always jokes around that when we're on Zoom together, that you never quite know what you're going to get when I'm on Zoom. Like he's come to know that he should duck and cover. So yeah, there's a lot of really shiny podcasters out there for the squeaky clean homeschool crowd, and we are not that crowd. There's a lot of people coming to homeschooling from various backgrounds now, and so we cater to the other side crowd. Like, science is real here. Love is love. All of that. And yeah, we like to say fuck from time to time. So we're in it to win it. I figured Amanda would like I had read your book previously and Amanda hadn't. Our last book was a John Holt book that was a total and complete shit show when it comes to ableism. We'd never read it before. We picked it because John Holt is this famous homeschool person. Oh my goodness, what a shit show it was. And so we suffered through the entire book. And I kept saying to Amanda, just wait till we get to the Jonathan Mooney book. It's going to be, I promise you, it's going to be so much better. So Amanda and I are both parents of neurodivergent kids. We've both been fortunate enough to homeschool. And so we've been able to provide our accommodations wherever necessary. We can hand select resources and mentors that lift up our kids, that are ideal for our kids. However, we realize there's a larger world beyond us and that our kids will interact with. So when we were first fine-tuning our vision for this podcast, we at one point considered establishing one of the pillars of our content to be neurodivergence. And I'll be super honest, Amanda brought up the fact that it would involve a whole lot of education and it would feel a lot like swimming, like a salmon swimming upstream. And so that is your whole gig. So I guess the first question that I'm curious about is, how do you stay motivated for advocacy work for neurodivergent education and acceptance and acknowledgement when you are a salmon swimming upstream in a world that keeps slapping puzzle pieces on everything during Autism Awareness Month, as they like to say? We're all aware autism exists, but right. So how do you stay motivated in that environment? Because I find it daunting and I'm not in it as much as you are.
Yeah, it's been 25 years of swimming upstream. My first book came out right after I graduated from college in 2000, book called Learning Outside the Lines. And I remember that I gave a talk right before graduation to elementary school kids in Providence, Fox Point School in Providence, Rhode Island. And it was a total shit show. It was like, I didn't know what I was doing. It was like a James Joyce-esque, profane rant about the tyranny of traditional education. And like the teachers in the room were like, stop talking. Yeah. Like, and at the end of the talk, a kid came up to me and he said, I've always felt stupid, crazy, and lazy. Those are his words. I'll never forget it. And you made me not feel that way. And so that was both an affirmation of the power that we have as individuals sharing our stories, our experiences, the power you all have in the work that you do to be supporting and celebrating some mom or dad or grandma who's taken it upon themselves to do right by their kid, and some kid who feels the same way that young man in Providence did. So that keeps me going. But the other thing that keeps me going is the outrage that I feel that young kid felt stupid, crazy, lazy in the year 2000. And on top of that, There has not been a talk that I've given in the 25 years in all 50 states, in 10 countries, in which some kid or a mom or dad has come up to me after the talk and said, I feel stupid, crazy, and lazy. Still, to this day. I got an email last week after a talk that I did virtually, and those words were used again. So what keeps me motivated is both a deep belief that we can make change, whether it's on a systems level or not, that doesn't matter. We can make change in the life of a person, an individual, and that change is necessary and urgent, because no matter how sort of many puzzle pieces these organizations throw onto their logos, we have systems and a world that's ultimately hostile to neurodivergent humans. Normal is good and right, and different is deficient and wrong. And we got a lot of work to do. So I try to do my part.
No, like that even if it's just an individual person, that is a motivating factor, because I'm going to need to remember that sometimes when it feels like a really big task trying to explain your kid for the 900th time, right? Sorry, Amanda, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that Meagan kind of touched on it before, but our first book was Teach Your Own by John Holt, because it's really popular in the homeschool community, and neither one of us actually had read it. So we thought, oh, well, this will be a great one. And our book club is kind of this idea. You can read with us if you want, or you can just listen for the Sparks Note version, take away the high points and the low points. And the idea that learning disabilities, and especially dyslexia, don't exist and aren't a thing. And if you just take your kid out of public school, they'll go away and it'll all be fine, it's such a hurtful ideology to still be spouting in 2024. And so it's really important for us to have your story, your book, and you here with us to provide this counterpoint to the discussion in the homeschool community. Learning disabilities, they are real, and they don't have to be bad, but they are real. And we need to acknowledge that and help our kids in a wide variety of ways to make sure that they can achieve whatever they want to achieve, instead of sweeping it under the rug and allowing them to create all of these negative stories for themselves. So again, thank you so much for being here and helping us provide that counterpoint to a dogma that's really prevalent in the homeschool community.
Yeah, and just in case anyone's confused, like who is listening, not y'all, but who is listening, they are real. And I think of our conceptual framework as an evolution that sort of threads forward and is an and both from certain ways of seeing brain differences over time. Look, before diagnosis, kids like me and that kid in Providence were just the stupid, crazy, lazy kids. That was our lens for them. And then stupid, crazy, lazy is just the tip of the iceberg of words that were used to describe them. And so it was progress for a medical model to come forth and say, no, look, this isn't a moral defect. This isn't a character defect. This is a brain, quote unquote, defect. But at the same time, that sort of defect lens was also problematic and limited, because it didn't tell the whole story of neurodivergent humans. It told one side of the story. And beginning in the mid 90s or early 2000s, the story was, well, let's look at the limitations in the environment around a kid. And I think that's somewhat of the sort of ethic of that John Holt, though it was written much longer, which is the kid's not the problem, the environment's the problem. And if we change the environment around the kid, their learning can excel. But it was steeped in that ableist language that you mentioned, in that sort of normalization language at the same time of, all kids are the same. If we just get them out of the environment, they'll all learn the same way. So we got to do an and both, which is like, yeah, the environment is limited and does disable students. I mean, American public education at no fault of the educators. It's the system as a whole has been disabling and failing neurodivergent learners and learners writ large, period, full stop. And so it is right to critique that and to seek out to create a more learner-centered, authentic learning experience outside of it. And at the same time, we can say, wherever you go, there you are. Meaning the kid like me who spells at a third grade level is going to spell at a third grade level in Mrs. C's class or in my mom's class. These are real brain differences. And, one of the things about normal sucks as an intellectual journey for me, very much I started that book with the working title of like the new normal, which is common to say. People like to say that about neurodivergence, but as if you listen to it or read it, the last chapter is about critiquing the whole notion of you can just apply normal and reframe. There are differences. People are different, and we have to acknowledge that and celebrate it and not efface it by just saying, "Oh, everyone's different, so everyone's the same." Like that's an illogical way to make sense of the reality of human embodiment and human difference. So that idea of being able to walk and chew gum, the environment was broken. A kid with a difference was being marginalized in that, but they still have neurobiologically based differences that need support and need acknowledgement, and then ultimately need to be recognized and celebrated.
Yeah. Also very true. I'm digesting, sorry.
No process. So then I'll jump in while you digest. Going
Love
kind
all
of
of it.
back to your book itself, In Normal Sucks, on page 192, for anyone who wants to look at what I'm talking about. There's a quote that specifically says, "People with differences get services in school. Their struggles are recognized, but only if they are willing to pathologize themselves, emphasize their problems, downplay their strengths, and claim differences as deficiencies." And it's absolutely true. I live here in California, and we participate in the homeschool charter system. So we're technically part of a public charter school, but we're allowed to homeschool within that system. So we have the system of IEPs and things like that. And that's a pretty common thing here in California. And so I have seen it with my own child. I've seen it with friends and their children. I've seen it as my time as a foster parent working to secure regional center services, where you have to just lay out the absolute worst things, and really highlight how ugly and awful it is to get anything. How do you see parents navigating this system as it currently is? Do they fight tooth and nail to change the system they're in? Or do they play the game the system has laid out and then, advocate separately outside of that, maybe at the state level or in their own school districts?
Yeah, what a dilemma we're all faced with as we try to do the micro, which is survive, do right by our kids, and at the same time do the macro, which is try to imagine something different, not just for our kids, but all kids. And a part of navigating that and in the individual space is about recognizing the macro and the policies that have gotten us there. I wrote an essay for the New York Times, I don't know, back in the day before Normal Sucks. And I wanted to call the essay, the working title of the essay was, "We're all special now. Shut up and sit your special ass down." Like, that didn't fly because obviously it was not New York Times unfiltered version, which would have been much more fun. And it was
a great idea for us, Amanda.
Yes, and it was very much in the ethic and sentiment of complete sort of mind fuck that we do of like everyone's different, but now we all going to be the same in school. The notion that the only way to be recognized as an individual is to be recognized as a deficient individual is both embedded in policy, meaning the IDEA, the ADA, our major forms of federal policy require that as the only way to get anything resembling an individualized education, and it's your only tool you have. But it's also even bigger than that. I think it is fundamentally not a flaw in the system, but by design. Because the message that everybody else gets is different is deficient. You can get something a little different, but you got to say that you're not normal, your kid's not normal, something's wrong with your kid. And so that kind of keeps everybody in check, because who wants to be that kid, and who wants to be seen that way. So let's recognize it, acknowledge it, and have consciousness of it. And now let's think about ways to manage it. So look, as an individual parent, unfortunately, that you play the game in the short term and try to contribute to changing it in the long term. I think that has to be done artfully. It has to be done transparently with kids. My mom would say to me, look, I don't believe this diagnosis, but it's helpful for us to survive school so we can thrive in life. And that was the conversation we were having at a really young age. It was very transparent. And so I think that's the path that I see most parents forced to pursue. Now, I will tell you, and this is one of the places of optimism, to go back to the kind of what keeps me going. One of the things that I am most excited about is there is a emerging coalition of special education directors in multiple districts all around the country who are doing strength-based IEP planning, which is by definition the antithesis of a deficit model. It's about having goals and metrics to grow a student's strengths, which fundamentally challenges the deficit orientation that's intrinsic to the pathology model. And that's happening in public schools right now in America, in many communities. And that I've supported them, spoke with them, and parents can bring that back to their district and say, look what's happening. Look what's happening here in a public school, not a charter school, not a private school, here. And there's no statutory barriers to implementing that, meaning nothing in the IDEA or ADA bars the school district from doing strength-based IEP planning. And that's one of the reasons it's taken off very quickly. The other thing I would say, it's something I'm optimistic about too. There are districts that are advancing the notion of universal design of instruction, not accommodations for some, because once you get into the accommodations for some model, then you got to figure out who gets it, who doesn't. Well, the person with the most problem gets it, this person doesn't. And universal design is really premised on the idea of accommodations for all, regardless of diagnostic status. So those are two trends that are real, that aren't theoretical, that aren't hypothetical. They're happening in schools, public schools across the country that could go to scale. And that's something that individual moms, dads, caregivers can bring back and demand from the district that they're working with, whether it be under a sort of charter network perspective or whether they're actually still in traditional schools, and demand for it to change.
Well, and I like the fact too that even if, so we're not tied to a charter, it doesn't exist where we live. And as the super burn the establishment down unschooler that I am, it wouldn't probably be a fit for us anyway. But public school sets the tone for so much in this country, right? It is the Northern Star. And so just having that shift, even for those of us that have no connection to the public school, will hopefully create that societal shift, which I think is a very hopeful thing. But I liked the fact that you talked about within there somewhere something about getting that diagnosis, about accepting that piece, because having that piece unlocks so many things, even just in day-to-day life, right? In the UCLA talk that you did with Dr. Ned talked about, he said, like, I've heard doctors tell parents their kids have ADHD with the same level of seriousness that they would tell them their kid has leukemia, right? And for me, when my kid was diagnosed with autism, finally, it was like the greatest day ever, because nobody understood his other wacky diagnoses that were like sensory processing disorder. You go into a restaurant and you say, my kid needs to supervise the exact amount of tomato sauce that goes on that pizza. He's autistic. And people are like, it's the one diagnosis that people, even though it's hugely misunderstood, it's the one that they think they understand the best, right? And so it's like, oh, autism, and everybody kind of like drops all their defenses and goes, whatever the kid needs, right? And they don't truly understand it, but people are willing to work with that one in ways that they aren't with other things, I feel like. So I was like, that was the greatest day of our life was, if I say, no, that banana has a brown spot, it's not going to fly. And I'm like, he's autistic. Oh, we'll find you a banana that doesn't have a brown spot. Thank you so much. Right. Because this is my day to day. Right. And there is that asynchronicity. I mean, he's 12. He's taking his first college class this summer in advanced level mathematics, but that banana can't have a brown spot. Right. So it's a really unique existence to try to navigate. There's not really a map for that, speaking of kind of like future hopefulness and future world scenarios, right? The term neurodivergent is newer. The movement is newer. The awareness is newer, right? The acceptance is something we're still working on. I feel like the movement is a little bit disorganized compared to other movements, right? When it comes to civil rights, when it comes to, it's Pride Month, right? It's June, hooray. If you're watching this at any time of year, happy Pride all year long, right? A lot of other movements have organized in ways where they're like, these are the terms we like. These are the terms we don't accept. We don't find these terms helpful, right? Or we don't find these terms respectful, useful, etc. And I don't feel like that's happened in the neurodivergent movement yet, right? I mean, we're still arguing whether person first language is appropriate or not. There's people who are still, do we hang on to Asperger's? Do we let it go? I mean, it's medically been let go, but there's people who feel an identity with that. And, there's plenty of people who don't even realize that medically it's not there anymore. So sometimes I get a little squirrely in the world of the disorganization of the movement. So I'm curious, in a dream scenario, like where would you love to see the movement? Let's say 10 years from now, you can pick whatever time frame you want. And in contrast to your dream scenario, what do you think is realistic in that same time frame as far as organizing the movement and kind of creating a unified voice for forward movement?
Yeah, I don't like the brown spot of the banana either. I'm just good. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, you got not. And too much sauce in my pizza sucks. So
it's a thing. We went to Antarctica earlier this year, right? And we left South America to go to Antarctica with fresh bananas on ship. And the ship was amazing. We went on an expedition ship and I explained to them, he's going to need grilled chicken every single day. And, it has to be cooked the exact same way. And they were great, right? But there's no refilling of the bananas in Antarctica, right? So about midway through the trip, it was like, okay, then we had to go to applesauce, I mean, it was, but the expedition crew was amazing. They totally got it. But yeah, it presents some issues. We took an entire suitcase of food to Antarctica to make sure the kids didn't starve. We got it done.
You got it done. And I'm going to answer the question, I promise. And I think that this is a good segue to where I think I'd like us to be. I'm still just trying to I'm still trying to understand why somebody can just not like the brown spot on their banana. Right. And why does that have to be mediated by a diagnosis or label? Like why can't we get to a place like that as human beings? And I do think that that's the ultimate cultural transformation that the neurodiversity movement should be, and I think it is, but it can be a sharper message, should be advocating for. There's a saying in the disability rights movement that we're all temporarily able bodies, that disability is actually a central fact of being human. It is what it means to be embodied, to eventually experience limitation, decline, and disability physically. And we've all just, as a society, acted like that's not true. What's true is norm, the amalgamation of medium and average. That's what's true, and the rest of you all are aberrant. And that's really the cultural and consciousness that the neurodiversity movement is trying to transform and change. And so I think having some clarity on that as a movement is really important. Now, obviously, there's all sorts of sub goals underneath that. But ultimately, our goal is like, if somebody doesn't want a brown spot in a banana, who fucking cares? And right. And that is what it means to be an embodied human. So that's one North Star that I would have. The other North Star would be for the movement to have coalesced around some policy goals. And I do think that we could go either way with this as a movement. Social justice movements in the last 10 years in some ways have been dramatically ineffective in advancing policy. Social justice movements, they've spent a lot of time talking about language, a lot of time talking about recognition, but when it comes to identifying substantive policy goals that transform systems, I can't name one. If you look at Occupy Wall Street, this was a moment in time in which banks had defrauded America and people were losing their homes. And that movement had very few policy wins because it devolved into the circular firing squad. You didn't say this right, I didn't say this right, you didn't say this right, and it fought amongst itself. And I think the same has been true for other social justice expressions. And the neurodivergent movement at times can run the risk of getting too caught up into conversations around language, conversations around who in what space gets to say what. And I think having some clearer, transformative, bold policy goals would be catalytic for everyone saying, okay, we can kind of put some of that stuff aside and work together on this. And what's the work together? The third thing I would say from an aspirational perspective is I do feel very strongly that our movement is the neurodivergent and disability rights movement. And I think that's the holding of the whole that we have to do. The North Star for that is the LGBTQ plus AI movement, because just look at that acronym, how many different experiences needed to be held together in a coalition that had a goal of recognizing same-sex marriage, that one of many goals, right? And so that's a really good kind of case study for what our movement should and could be. And that disability piece is real, because I went around the bend rhetorically, conceptually in my 25 years of rejecting disability language as it pertained to learning attentional differences. That was the word. Claiming it as a capital D social construct. Disability is a social construct. It's not a medical term. The problem's in the environment, not the person. And then also acknowledging that neurodivergent, having autism, being autistic, experiencing autism, whatever word you want to use, being dyslexic, experiencing dyslexia, being a person with dyslexia is categorically a different brain experience. So that's why the neurodivergent bucket's important. So I think our movement needs to be neurodivergent and disability rights. That's what we're doing. We can't assume one over the other, and we can't separate. And when you hold the whole like that, guess what? That is a big old movement. I mean, we're talking about 25, 30, 40% of the population at some point in their life will experience either one of those phenomena, regardless of the rhetorical disputes that we have. And that's a movement that can make real asks around education policy, around health policy, around economic policy, minimum basic income, etc. So that's my vision. That's my goal. That's my North Star. And we got a long way to go on that. But I am really optimistic about the emergence of a neurodivergent social justice movement, the intersections with disability rights, and the folks on the day-to-day out there in America like you, trying to knit together coalitions of people who maybe don't share the exact brain experience, but they share the same aspiration for a more inclusive society.
I'm here for that. Yeah. I, as a physically disabled mom to a neurodivergent kid, I am 100% here for that movement. Like, sign me up. So we want to be very respectful of your time. And we do have a special guest who's going to join us here in just a minute. So to that end, I just want to go ahead and make a couple quick announcements. So number one, we want to thank our premier sponsor, Hub of Curiosity. Hub of Curiosity believes that learning begins with interest, and they offer a wide range of classes on OutSchool to enrich your homeschooling or your at-home journey just outside of regular traditional school. You'll find hands-on STEM taught by industry professionals, writing opportunities for wordsmiths and reluctant writers alike, and so much more. They offer virtual secular co-ops for middle schoolers and high schoolers, if that's something you're looking for. You can find a class for their links and offerings in both our Instagram bio and our YouTube description. And all Homeschool Moms Unfiltered listeners can use the code OFCURE115, so that's OFCUR115 for $15 off your first Hub of Curiosity class. Okay, so that's our first one. Thank you so much to Hub of Curiosity. And number 2, you can win a free copy of Normal Sucks by Jonathan Mooney. We are giving one away. The winner will be announced on July 20th. So make sure you enter today. There's a link on the description of our podcast, wherever you're listening. And you can also find the link on our link tree on Instagram. So go ahead and go enter. We look forward to actually giving that away. It's our first big giveaway here at our podcast. So we're excited.
I love it. So we are going to wrap up with special guests who I'm going to introduce as I kind of let them into the studio here. So Jonathan, we actually discovered your books through Tara, who is a homeschool mom that is in the same virtual homeschool mom book club that Amanda and I met through. And we would all just kind of toss out books and suggest things that looked interesting and were meaningful. Some of them were amazing. Some of them were, that we were glad we read them, but they weren't life-changing, right? Yours definitely was, which is how we've come back to it. But yeah, so we're excited to welcome Tara and her amazing kiddo Crosby. Crosby, if you scooch in just a little bit more, we can get awesome. Welcome. So Jonathan has a hard stop in about 10 minutes. So what we're going to do, if you could, Tara, let us know what drew you to Jonathan's books.
Absolutely. So I think the first book I came across was Normal Sucks. And what drew me in was the title. Yeah, normal does suck. And living and learning outside of the lines, sign me up. I want to know more about that.
I love it. And then I know both of you have prepared a couple of questions. So how about we go 1 and 1 so that if we run out of time, both of you have an opportunity to ask a question. So you want to kick us off with the first one, Tara, and then we'll come to you, Crosby?
Sound good?
Rockstar.
So a question that I have is, do you think reading has to be taught, or is it a skill learned over time?
Well, just don't get right to it, huh? Don't mess around with softball. I get it.
Some hard stop. So she was like, boom.
Dude, let's do it. Well, first of all, thank y'all for taking the time out of your day to come and be on this with me. It's quite a privilege. And Crosby, I want to hear about some World War II facts. Okay, so hit me when it's your turn, right? And also the good news, I just got a text from the thing that I had at 11:15 that is now being pushed back a little bit, so we don't got to rush. So do I think reading is something that learns over time, or does it need to be taught? Look, if you look at the majority of human beings on a longitudinal basis that are surrounded with linguistically rich environments, they pick up reading. I mean, they do. That's the majority. There are a significant subset of humans, many of whom with brain differences that we lump under the category of learning disabilities, learning differences, etc., who need some direct instruction around reading. And both can be true at the same time. And we should be able to hold the whole on both of those ideas. What we do know, though, and this is really important, is that listening is as valuable from a cognitive development perspective as reading. And this notion of a hierarchy around that is really a false hierarchy. And we also know that young folks, any people who listen opposed to read, will eventually become better readers. So it's not you go this path or that path. It's in service of the same end and the same goal. And there's a wonderful person to check out if you're interested in this at all from just a personal inspiration perspective. A friend of mine named Cliff Weissman, who never read a book. Listened to books his whole life. First book he listened to was my first book called Learning Outside the Lines. And than many elsewhere. And Cliff went off to Brown University, where I went to school, and then also founded a social venture while at Brown called Speechify. And Speechify is huge. I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
You're rocking it, right? That's Cliff. And Cliff is the story of a listener, not a reader. And frankly, they're really one and the same. So those are my thoughts about reading and whether it can be taught, or whether we innately have it, or whether we should be broadening the category altogether.
I had one of my kids took a college class and struggled to get their PDF into Speechify, and I copy and pasted 700 pages into Speechify. And that kid got an A in that class. Like, it was time well spent. But she has some British guy reading her textbooks, and she's as happy as a clam, right? I love that. That's so awesome.
Yeah, that's right.
Very cool. All right, Crosby, you're up, pal. What you got?
What do you want to go with?
Student.
Oh, what a rad question, man! And I also heard that you're a hockey player, which is super cool. What position? Like off defense? I'm not. Are there positions in hockey? Because they just seem to be all trying to kill each other. It seems like they're just trying to fight. It seems like it's a game that's just about an excuse to fight. Am I wrong about that, or no? I'm kidding.
So just to jump in on the hockey thing and dyslexia. So Crosby says for him, like, his dyslexia helps him see the game through.
Yeah.
Where it's not as linear. Maybe it's linear for some other people, but he sees like the big picture, like what's going to happen. Believe it or not, there's a plan to it, strategy behind it.
Oh, I know it's a deep game, and I love it. And that was the same way for me and playing soccer.
Yeah. So
yeah, that resonates with me very, very much. And a good example of dyslexia being your superpower, man. So I hope you know that about yourself. So let me talk about Brown real quick. Look, Brown is a unique place in the world of higher education. It's a unique place because of its focus on the learner and the learner's interests and their passions being the driver of what one does at Brown. There are no core requirements. You don't want to take a class, don't take it. And that's just the beginning of it being a place that is all about following your interests as a human being. And by default, Brown is a welcoming and inclusive place for neurodivergent humans. Like any other elite, highly selective university, they're still holding on very much to a traditional definition. Not entirely, but still holding on to a traditional definition of what a good student looks like academically in terms of being admitted. But with that said, I know they look beyond that, and they look to find interesting, intriguing, and often neurodivergent students. I founded this year with another classmate who was in my class of 2000, at the university's request, a alumni affinity group for alumni with disability and neurodivergence. It's the first of its kind in the Ivy League, and it's the first. We believe it's the first of its kind also in the country. So that signals that they're taken seriously, that neurodivergent humans add value to the university, and beyond adding value to the university, neurodivergent folks have strengths and talents, not despite their differences, but because of them, and that we need those type of thinkers more than ever.
Yeah. Good question, Crosby. I love that. I learned so much about Brown from your book. It was actually one of my questions that I had lined up, but if we're short on time, I'd rather have Tara and Crosby go through their questions, but I'm totally going to email you a question about Brown as it pertains to one of my kids later.
Yeah. Please.
Tara, you want to go with your next question?
Sure. So my next question is, what at age 12 clicked for you that made reading accessible?
Yeah. really three things kind of set that up for me. One, and this was really important and fairly controversial, the idea that I was, a late bloomer when it came to reading. My mom would read the book Leo the Late Bloomer to me, which is, if you don't know it, it's a super rad book. It's about like a lion that can't do all these things and eventually blooms. And it's a book for kids, like little kids. And my mom like read that book to me, every night until I was 18. Like she was like very much like, you're going to hit your stride. And now that late blooming kind of idea that a lot of moms and dads and caregivers had shared with their kids has been validated by science, which is often how it works. Sometimes like the moms knew first, and then the other people come around and say, oh, I did this empirical research study to just prove what you already knew. So I that was the message I was given of like, you'll hit your stride. You're a late bloomer. It's cool. I was given that message by my mom. I was given that message by a few teachers, but not enough. So that was challenging. The other thing that kind of laid a foundation was I was read to, and this is before amazing technology like speech to text, text to speech. So school books, my mom would read it to me. And again, that science that shows that listening builds comparable pathways to reading, that was really important in the brain. And then the last thing was interest-based reading was really what unlocked it for me. Like I work and talk with a lot of struggling young folks who don't fit school. And often the first thing a teenager reads cover to cover in their entire life is the driver's manual, right? Because they need it, they want it. And like we forgot that a little bit in how we teach reading. It is a tool at the end of the day. It's more than that, I believe. It is existential for us to share stories and for us to communicate that way, but it's also a tool. It's a way to acquire knowledge and information and to get things that you need. So interest-based reading, again, has a lot of science behind it. Good reading teachers have been doing it since the beginning of time. Hey, what are you into? Read that. Okay. Duh. And that's what unlocked it for me. I'm still not a great reader, like in terms of like making mistakes. I was helping my son with words I don't know. Like I can't do that. I helped my oldest son, who's 17, studies for his biology final. And it was just like a comedy show for him of me trying to pronounce these like 10-letter words with like no vowels, and like it was a complete mess. And that's cool, like some people are great at reading, some people aren't. That's like the continuum of human difference. Why should we expect that to be any different? It's true for height, it's true for weight, it's true for eye color, it's true, and it's true for reading.
Love that. I laughed ridiculously hard about your point about the driving test, because Tara and Amanda in our weekly book club got the digest of my kids. So I have my 16-year-old is an avid reader and loves fantasy. And I handed him the driver's manual, and he was like, "This is the worst book I've ever read." There's no dragons in it anywhere, and I'm not reading it, right? And so, in a very neurodivergent way, came up with his own way of studying for the test, where he would cycle through all the practice test questions online until he had cycled through all of them and found his own way to backdoor the test because the book had no dragons in it and he wasn't reading it. And so I laughed really hard because my kid was actually the opposite of that. But I can totally see your point. As somebody who went through high school never reading any of the books that were assigned to me because they all sucked, and then finding that you can pick your own books. And when you can pick your own books, freaking awesome. It's like, all right, stop giving kids these crap books to read. Sorry, Crosby, where you showed up, and there's going to be language here today. Sorry, you knew what to expect when you got here, Crosby. Crosby, you have another question on our docket of questions that I'm super excited about. What you got as your last question there?
Oh, that's a rad question. The only problem with the question is like I can't just have one, because there's like, as I'm sure 12 different leagues, and like you got to have one in each league. So in the MLS, my team is the LA Galaxy. That's my team. That's where I live in Los Angeles. I know LAFC. They got the better name for sure, but I'm not bandwagoning it, going with the Galaxy. In the Premier League, Tottenham. That's our team. That's been tough to root for, but that's the point of supporting in the good and the bad. In the Bundesliga, which is the German league, who just lost the final in the Champions League to Real Madrid. That was a bummer. And then I have a favorite team in every other league you can imagine, just not the Saudi league. So if you have a favorite Saudi team that you can hit me to, then I welcome the referral.
I love it. That was such an awesome question. Yeah, Crosby's dad is from England, so he's in on the various international soccer leagues and all that good kind of stuff. So I was like, when I saw that question on those, I was like, that's an awesome question, Crosby. I love it.
Awesome question, man.
And I love it. All right. So can I ask you my one Brown question before we wrap up, if you're pushed?
Yeah.
Okay. So I didn't know a lot about Brown. I had a ridiculously hoity-toity private school education, and it was very much wasted on a person who does not like traditional school. And so I went to school with all these girls. It was an all-girls school. They went on to the Ivy League, and they have PhDs and fucking Sanskrit and everything else you can imagine. And I was like, what is that, right? It was just I'm happy for them, but it was just not my journey, right? So I don't know a ton about the Ivy League. I never explored it, had no interest, right? I have a kid, though, who is she's already in college at 15. She got a college scholarship very early. She's neurodivergent. She's a prodigy in the art world. And so we went to do some things at like FIT in New York City and Parsons and stuff like that. And her thing is like, I got to show up here and take these basic level classes in order to get to the meaty stuff that I actually want to do. Because, the kids coming in from public school haven't had the same journey that she's had, where she's had exposure to travel the world and fully immerse herself 100% in what she's doing. So we looked at things like Hampshire, which is up in New England, which is an unschooling college. And I'm like, I'm struggling to pay $70,000 a year for you to continue unschooling like I've been doing for the last 10 years, right? Like, why am I paying $70,000 for that? And she looked at some schools in Europe and things like that. But I'm curious, like, how customizable the education is at Brown. Like, if she wants to go there and do like, something about the history of the color purple that goes back to biblical times from Murex snails on the Mediterranean coast and make an entire education around that. Is that something that's possible at Brown? Like, how in-depth and nerded out can you get there with your topics?
Oh, you can go full nerd. I mean, like you can let your nerd freak flag fly. Let me tell you, like, so yeah. The answer is yes. Brown has no core requirements. You can declare a major. The major is like 20% or less of your course load. The rest of the courses are whatever and anything you want. You can also do a independent concentration, which is create your own purple snail color purple major and study that entirely yourself. I wrote my first book, Learning Outside the Lines, started as a group independent study. Me and another transfer student that I met on the first day of transfer orientation wanted to explore a book. They made a class for it. Sold that book the following fall and integrated it entirely into my English literature degree. So I did 3/4 of my courses independent study, all on this book, Learning Outside the Lines. Wanted to found a nonprofit organization based on a mentoring program I was doing, Eye to Eye. Enrolled in a course. They created a course for me. Learned about nonprofit, learned about fundraising, launched the organization. So Purple Snail, everything in between, the Brown University is the place for you.
I love that. And so that was not on my radar until I read your book as an option for being just like this complete paradise. She'd been doing some research online and she kept finding all these programs that look like dream programs, but they were all PhD level programs. And she's like, do I have to complete to get to my PhD to have the educational freedom that I want and to be able to go the depth that I want? And then when I read your book, I was like, maybe Brown is the place, and maybe that's an option for her. So thank you for that. I love that.
And just while we're on this notion of higher education, real quick, to end where we began with Crosby's question about Brown. Look, one of the things I'm most excited about is the expansion of the learning economy and the learning networks post high school. those are happening and have been happening in the homeschool, unschool world now, and that's been accelerated post-COVID. But the next frontier is the consolidation and the sort of organization of alternative pathways to launch a successful adult life. And that is happening right now. So Crosby, if you're sitting there being like, I don't like Brown sounds cool, whatever, but that's not really my thing, I guarantee you there's going to be multiple ways for you to advance yourself, grow as a human being, set yourself up for employment in any way that's aligned with things that you care about. The thing that I'm most optimistic about for young people like you, Crosby, is that opportunity. So that's hopeful. That's something you should hold on to. College is cool. It's cool for some, but it doesn't have to be cool for all. And there'll be many ways to thrive in life for you and for everybody. So that's something for all of us to continue to advocate for, believe in, and share with others.
Yeah, there's a book that I read called Better Than College. And it's have you read it? The Blake Bowles book?
Yeah.
Okay. So my teenager actually went to Berlin last year with Blake for a month and has applied to go to he's doing Istanbul and Athens next year. And he's applied for that also. And I feel like the title's a bit of a misnomer because it sounds like it's going to be an anti-college book, and it's not. It's what you just said. It's great for some. It's not for everyone, right? But that book really, I kind of had these stepping stones to get into unschooling where I cut one more string that was a tether to the quote unquote real world or the right way to educate. And that was one of them, right? That was kind of the last one that was holding me on, was like, well, what about college? Well, what about a transcript? Well, what about this? And that book was epic. So yes, I totally echo that, Crosby. And I think if your mom hasn't read the book yet, it's on her to be read list. I know, because I know your mom. So it's pretty awesome. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today. For anybody listening, I literally emailed Jonathan before we even launched our podcast and said, I have no stats for you to say like, hey, you should come on our podcast because we have so many listeners. I got nothing. But I was like, I'm a homeschool mom and I tell my kids all the time, ask. The worst somebody can do is say no, right? And I'm like, so I'm asking. And he said yes to us when we had not a single episode launched. So thank you so much, Jonathan, for coming and chatting with us. It means the world to us tremendously. And for listeners who are trying to find their path for their kids who are, experiencing this world differently than the quote unquote normal path, I know that your advice and expertise and your books are doing wonders in that world. So as a reminder, we are giving away a copy of Jonathan's book, Normal Sucks, on July 20th. You have an option between audio and physical book because we also agree that audiobooks are books. And there's a link to enter on our link tree. It'll be in the description of all of our episodes that are covering Normal Sucks this month. So yeah, we're super excited. And thank you so much for joining us, Jonathan, Tara, and Crosby. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Have an awesome rest of your day. Happy homeschooling, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.